5 reasons to keep inventory. So if inventory is expensive, it costs a lot of money to keep it, why do we keep so much of it? Well, there are 5 reasons, which we will outline now, to keep inventory. One reason is to actually be able to process or transform inputs into outputs. We need to have some inventory in the process, work in progress, or what we call it, pipeline inventory, right? If a clinic or a unit in a hospital wants to cure patients, the patient has to be present in the clinic. So therefore, it has to have some kind of inventory of patients, right? Same thing in manufacturing. If you need to produce some products, the production time is not zero. It takes a considerable amount of time to, for example, make a car. And because of this, we need the inventory, the work in progress inventory, or work in process inventory kept. That's one reason. Another reason is seasonal inventory. Some products are required only in some parts of the time horizon, or some products we have inputs for them over some limited time horizon. So example of seasonal products, which we call those products, right? For example, if you sell bikinis, they usually sell during hot months, much more than during cold months. Or if you think about skiing equipment, again, the seasonality will be opposite. So for those products, the demand is seasonal. And because of this, some companies decide to manufacture units of products for this demand ahead of time. And what we say, they build seasonal inventory to be ready for the season. They produce a lot of units ahead of the season, thereby saving some costs because they can use capacity more efficiently throughout the year. The example you see in this picture is the other side of the seasonality, when we have input that is seasonal. In this case, when we harvest beetroots that we use to produce sugar, when you harvest them, there is only part of the year, a small part of the year when the harvest occurs. And it's very difficult to process all the beetroots immediately. So what is being done is, you can see in this pink line, the inventory of beetroots is built up, and then it is depleted throughout most of the rest of the year. And because of this, we can actually use limited capacity to process beetroots, right? We can process them at this rate, right? And so because input is higher than output or processing power until this point, there is a build-up, right? This is the total beetroots received, right? They received this part, and then we no longer receive any beetroots. And this is cumulative processing of beetroots, right? So we process them at a smaller rate than we harvest them, and therefore there is a difference between those two lines. This is the build-up inventory, right? The third reason is the cycle inventory. It occurs when several flow units are processed collectively, which happens in some things like batch production or transportation. This is when, for example, it's much better to transport a larger number of units from a warehouse to supermarket rather than ship one unit at a time. That would be very expensive, right? So if you observe inventory in a supermarket, you might see that this inventory changes in this pattern where there is a small number of units, and then suddenly it goes up, and then it is consumed daily at a small rate, and then again it goes up when another shipment arrives. This is cycle inventory. Now, by the way, there is a similarity between seasonal and cycle inventory, that it has this pattern of, right, might be sudden increase in inventory and then slow depletion of inventory. Don't confuse the two. There is different reason behind a similar pattern. In cycle inventory, it's the decision is due to economies of scale. And for example, the size of the truck will affect how large the shipment is efficiently, right, shipped. So this cycle here, the distance or the time from this point to this point, from this point to this point, is more affected by the size of the shipment that we want to purchase every time. In seasonality, we don't have any control over the time. The time is usually given due to the length of the season and compared to the length of the, let's say, 1 year, if seasonality is annual. By the way, seasonality can also be weekly. For example, demand for cinema tickets is actually much higher on Fridays or Saturdays than, let's say, on Mondays. This is weekly seasonality, where 2 or 3 days will have higher demand than the average daily demand. Another type of inventory or reason to keep is decoupling inventory, which we call usually buffers, right? This is inventory between process steps in order to allow us to operate these steps relatively independently from each other, so that we don't stop any of them due to what we call blocking or starvation, right? So here is an example. If you have an assembly process that assembles some products, and then you have a machine, a milling machine, that makes a part of this assembly process, and there is this inventory here. This inventory is called decoupling inventory or buffer, and we try to maintain sufficient number of parts here in order to never have to stop the assembly line process, right? And so this buffer serves here a purpose, the decoupling, when we make the parts on the milling machine from smooth operation of assembly line. And the final reason to keep inventory is safety inventory. This is the inventory that we keep in order to hedge against some uncertainty in the demand, right? So, for example, often in a retailer, we will observe there is a cycle inventory because we receive products in batches due to economies of scale in transportation. But in addition to this cycle, there will be some safety inventory, because we also don't want to run out of inventory when we're waiting for the next shipment to arrive. We will actually keep some extra units in order to not to have stockouts or not to have empty shelves of some products. Now, I call those 5 reasons to keep inventory rather than 5 types of inventory, because sometimes there is inventory that you may consider is there for more than one reason, right? An example that we just had for the decoupling buffer, we could say that this inventory of parts for assembled products, right, is there to decouple. But we might also say this is a cycle inventory, because maybe we produce on the milling machine products in batches, and those batches will be seen as cyclical inventory, and the size of the batch is what we decide, and as the size of the cycle inventory will be affected, right? One could also see other examples where, for example, decoupling inventory will also have some safety inventory, and so on. So here are some questions. What are the reasons to keep inventory in the below examples? Choose all answers that apply. Is this a pipeline inventory, seasonal, cycle, decoupling, or safety inventory? Cars that are being produced on the assembly line would be a pipeline inventory. This is the work in progress. Winter jackets made ahead of the selling season, right, before the winter. That's seasonal inventory. Products on shelves in supermarkets, that would be both cycle inventory and safety, because, right, part of this inventory is cycle and another part is safety. Cycle is the part that changes predictably due to economies of scale, because, for example, we order every time 100 units, right? And then we receive them in one shipment, and then perhaps sell a few units every day or every week until the next cycle, the next shipment arrives. And then on top of this, in addition to this, we will keep some safety inventory in case while we're waiting for the next shipment, the demand spikes, the demand increases suddenly in order to hedge against this uncertainty and not lose some revenue or not sacrifice the quality of service.